Welcome back, everyone. Joined today by Misery Hates Company. First of all, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to being here.
So we've just had the release of Blood Knight, and we've both had a chance to play this for a little bit. And what are your initial thoughts on this? Are you enjoying it? Is it fun? Is it powerful, and so forth? And also, just for sharing for everybody, if you can mention kind of what your resonance combat rating is roughly,
Yeah.
if you don't know them, just so people kind of know the different perspectives we're talking from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with that. So my resonance is 3,200. Combat rating is 21,213. I have unlocked 30 essences for the Blood Knight so far. Very much enjoying the class. Actually, it's enjoying it more than I thought I would. I'm generally a sort of glass half full type of content creator. I try to be at least. But I'm actually even more surprised in how much I enjoy the class. I would say like the only real con that I've noticed is the lack of mobility, and I would say a lack of efficient mobility. So there's a few different options, and we can maybe talk about it here in a little bit. But like the bat skill, there's a shoulder piece that makes it pretty fun for movement as well. That also increases damage, and like outside of that, that's kind of it. And then the skewer, which I don't have yet, the main hand that makes you jump in the air and then crash down. But outside of that, like there's a couple other movement skills, but they don't do a ton of damage. But other than that, I mean, like there's already a pretty noticeable farm build that people are picking up on, focused around the headpiece Horns of the Hexed, which is the siphon blood is no longer channeled and sort of moves with you, dealing damage and draining life. So that combined with bats is a lot of fun. I haven't played it in PvP as of yet, but definitely farming in PvE a lot, trying to get some more essences. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I haven't found a build that I like hate or like a skill that is boring. Even one that I thought wasn't going to be all that fun. There's essences that already made it more fun, and that's Umbral Lance. That was a skill like going into it that I thought was going to be kind of a flop, but there's already been several essences that made it kind of fun to use.
Sure. So actually, it's interesting you mentioned mobility. I think that's a big topic for a lot of people. And first thing I wanted to mention about the class is actually the pants made to wander. And
Mm-hmm.
I will post an image of this because it's going to be blocked by our cameras here. But the description of this is that Spear Flurry now causes you to dash forward, damaging all enemies in the path, and it can be activated again up to 2 additional times. So I'm actually in Wartham, and just for everybody's awareness, this is just a circle with no mobs. So I come here a lot when I'm kind of testing or checking mobility, if anybody ever wants to do something like that. And a lot of people just instinctively think that you need to use this essence with Spear Flurry immediately after each other and kind of dash through the mobs. I actually think that this is the best essence that Blood Knight has because it's so versatile and can be worked into builds of really any set pieces that you may be running. And you may have room for it or you may not, depending on what you're doing. But what I want to show here is just kind of run around the circle and kind of explain why I find it so valuable. So if you just picture some packs around the circle like you would have in an open world farm loop or anything like that, you can use this to dash between the packs. So for example, you could dash, use your Whirling Strike, and it still has a timer. Dash to the next one, use your bats, dash to the next one, use your Whirling Strike. Then you can start using, say, your Skewer, hit a Whirling Strike, and then you're able to dash again and just kind of continually go around using this to basically eliminate that mobility issue, so to speak. Now, the open world farm build that I use here, and again, this will probably be blocked, but I run 4-piece Isatar, which is not the most popular or the most common build. In fact, I think that this build will not work very well for players of low or perhaps even mid resonance.
Sure.
But at high resonance, this works really well because the direct damage that I deal is enough to clear the pack. I do think the other build, which I will also show either at the end of this video or a separate video, in regards to running the banquet set and some of these other abilities that give you kind of persistent or AoE damage around your character, is the go-to build for the vast majority of players. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I would prefer to show that build first before I talk about the build that I'm using, because like I said, it's just going to be really limited about who this is really beneficial for. But if you have the damage and you have, say, the resonance, this build just decimates everything very quickly. You just essentially dash from pack to pack and so forth. But I have probably acquired about 30 essences as well myself, a little over that maybe.
Yeah.
The vast majority of which I unlocked immediately from things I had saved, like mystery legendary items. I just didn't have a tremendous amount of time to farm yesterday, so I kind of got all these essences at once, and I'm doing a little bit more farming today. But I think I am missing some of the ones that I would have interest in as well, and I think that's kind of the case for the majority of people. But I find the class very fun myself.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I don't like is it feels like some of these essences are kind of limited in
I agree with
you
that.
don't have a ton of options. And since I'm kind of at the essence extraction now, maybe you know where I'm going with this, but like for some of these choices, especially in the weapon slots, there isn't a
Mhm.
whole lot to choose from. So for an offhand here, I can pick one with Shadow's Edge. I should have gone to the extraction, excuse me. um, you got Skewer, Umbral Lance, a whole bunch of Umbral Lances, Shadow Edge, Wave of Blood, and that's it. So if you were not using one of those skills, not only
Just
can you
wasted
not put an
space.
essence on this offhand, but with the changes that we had, you can't put an essence on two slots, right? Because
Yep.
we now have two
Yep.
weapons, two offhand. So that is a big thing for me. Probably the biggest dislike I have. But over time, I imagine this is going to get some sort of adjustment because we're going to see new essences, of course, I imagine.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. But actually, before we get too much farther, how many dashes are you able to do with that skill? Because I'm actually a little jealous. I don't have that essence yet.
With the Spear Flurry, you can do three.
Okay.
And I did show a PvP build. I know you mentioned you had glanced at it.
Yeah.
So you can run 3 dashes from Spear Flurry, one,
Okay.
the three from there. You get two from the Skewer, and then you can
Okay.
also run Sanguinate to get another dash
Yeah.
on top of that. So there is no shortage of dashes. Gloom a decent set. I personally don't find Gloom the best set to farm.
Sure.
What's interesting about this build as well that I'm using is you can actually run triple two-piece. You could run two-piece Gloom, two-piece uh, the continual two-piece Grace, drawing a blank, and two-piece Banquet. So you could actually run a triple set and convert this into something like a
Uh,
dungeon build where you don't need
yeah,
that
yeah,
that
yeah.
bonus from Issatar. And there may be kind of some use there, but I actually think. Have you looked at any channeled builds, whether it be a dungeon or raid or anything like that?
I played around with, oh gosh, what's the skill? Not Sanguinate. Is it Sanguinate? No, Siphon Blood channeling. Because like I was in Echo Gaming. Shout out to Echo. His live stream last night, and he was using it like unmodified. It was actually a lot slower than what I would have wanted when you channel it like that. So I almost immediately added an essence to it to make it do something different.
Okay.
But yeah, so not too many channeling builds so far.
Yeah, me either. I have had poor luck, and I also don't have the entire Sown Gold set.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like one of those things where I'd like to try it, and I probably won't cover a dungeon build unless I kind of get sold on something else. It will be
Sure.
difficult for me because I want to explore those options, but I just haven't had any luck with that.
I am curious if there's going to be a viable channeling build because I think I'm sure we can probably both agree on this. There's not many builds for other classes right now that really have a good channel build. It just limits you so much, and it's actually the same kind of feeling I get towards the Abomination skill. So I like the skill. I like the idea of the skill. I like the shoulders that make it stay up longer, and then you can add the pants. I think it's pants that give you health. Maybe it's a chest piece, but one of the two essences that does that. But like, I just feel like I'm wasting almost an entire build when I use Abomination. And if you're not aware of what skill that is, everyone watching, so that's the one where you transform into like that blood, hungry beast or whatever, and you build up rage to keep it longer. But you don't get to utilize any of your other essences, so you get the damage bonus and you get the additional skills that you get from that, but you lose on all those essences for the time you're in that form. But yeah, so I guess I had the same sort of like hesitation when it comes to a channel build, but that I have with Abomination when it comes to that.
Yeah, this is the skill here. If anybody wants to pause and read it and so forth, I'm glad you mentioned that as well because that is my biggest disappointment in regards to skills. So I mentioned what I was disappointed in essences with, but that skill I was so looking forward to that. It's unique
Yeah.
to any other class. It kind of really is like defining to this class almost, and it's really lackluster and almost clunky. On top of that, it's actually bugged, and I don't want to.
Oh,
It's
really?
got it's got some issues as well. So rather than kind of sharing that, hopefully that gets fixed by the time this goes out. But trying to get these mobs to respawn so we can see the build in action kind of while we're going here. But I agree. So that this would be really nice either to see some essences that complement that a little bit better, or maybe the skill tweaked in some degree. It's still early, so I don't think we are kind
Not
of
the final form yet.
yeah. It doesn't. This isn't fully balanced per se, and I think that we'll see
Right.
adjustments at some point. But I was actually pleasantly surprised when I went into Battleground. It's tough to say if this is overpowered, at least from a high resonance perspective, and certainly meta will shift at some point. I was expecting something totally broken, and
Yeah.
it is very strong, but a large factor of that is people don't know what they're dealing with, right? They don't know the abilities you have, they don't know the sound cues or the audible cues and things of that nature. So you're kind of catching people off guard. and I actually see a lot of weakness in this class, which I'm not going to share until I swap to another class. But
Smart.
there are some inherent weaknesses of this class that could easily be dealt with in regards to PvP. So I was, rather than going into a deep dive in PvP, I just wanted to mention that for anybody that was interested or curious about that.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I haven't tried out PvP for it yet. I look forward to trying it out maybe later today. I'll probably make a video on that as well. But yeah, I agree. I think there's some pretty obvious weaknesses just by playing the class, not even in a PvP format, but just trying to jumping around with it. But it's so much fun to play, and I think that it'll be interesting to see, like you said, how the meta sort of shifts out, especially like I'd say like 2 months from now when maybe people go back off the Blood Knight and Blood Knight becomes just another, just another class and not like the hot new thing.
Yeah, and I wonder how long that will be, if it'll even take that long, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, that's true, for sure. I also wonder, I mean, what's your guess or timeline, do you think, that before they add even more essences for the Blood Knight? Do you think it'll be just like whenever they add more essences in general to other classes, the Blood Knight will get some, or do you think it'll get some in advance?
I think it will be with the other classes. I bet you they already have most of them, if not all of them, lined up. One thing that I've been kind of privy to information-wise is that a lot of this is actually done ahead of time. So if there are issues or problems, unless it's like really game breaking, so to speak, like some of the bugs and so forth, you usually won't see a change for, immediately. It'll kind of be like the following update. So I bet you that they already have the first line of essences that will roll out developed. And I'm kind of curious what they are. And I'm sure everybody wish they knew, but it would be interesting to see if it fixes some of the things we're mentioning already.
Right. No, I totally agree.
Fortunately, I can't get these mobs to spawn, but I'm trying to just attack where the packs would be anyways, just so people can kind of see how the order will go. But that's the gist. And if I had the other build set up, which I unfortunately don't have full essences for, hopefully I'll get those. And that's kind of the continual damage type build. And that works a lot better for the majority of players. So I really want to cover that one. And if I'm able to find some things before I publish this, I'll throw that up and so forth, and people can take a look. So
Awesome.
How have you taken a look at any leaderboards or done anything like that? One thing I did was just kind of glance at them. I didn't write names down or anything like that, but just to see how many people had in fact changed, or if you noticed a shift of individuals like all going over to Blood Knight. What is the exact population per se that has moved over to at least try it?
Sure. Yeah, on my server, it's definitely the majority of players have tried. I think there's like the top 1% of players on our leaderboards did not jump over. They've sort of like perfected their class and everything around it, so they don't want to move. But there's definitely the ones that are kind of curious that are doing it. Like, so to give you an idea, I was on the Crusader leading up to this, and for the Challenge Rift leaderboard, which is probably not the best leaderboard to use, but just as a reference point, I was around like 48. Like I was sort of on the bubble for that little event going on. And then I ran one Challenge Rift as soon as I switched to the Blood Knight, because we're immortal, and that was one of my dailies. And I immediately placed like a top 11, and I was like, whoa, okay, like that wasn't even a good time. So it were like a perfected build. It was just whatever I started with. And now I think I'm like in the mid 30s. So I think maybe it's people aren't doing the Challenge Rift. There's less immortals, obviously, that are probably switched to the Blood Knight. But yeah, so it's been a little interesting. I think that like the really hardcore players did not jump over, but the more casual players definitely did, from what I can tell.
So as I mentioned, I glanced, but I didn't do any recordings. I have a friend, James Howlett, who is a player in game, who did actually take numbers down.
Oh,
and
cool.
And at the moment, there is 148 Blood Knights ranked on the Inferno leaderboard, and the next closest class is actually Demon Hunters at 138. So,
oh wow.
And following that is Necro at 127, and I don't think that's too big of a jump. Like those three numbers are actually pretty close. The lowest is actually Monk at 61.
Oh my gosh, by half, over half.
It's less than half of what we have for Blood Knights, and that's kind of just some of the more interesting numbers that we have. We've unfortunately lost your camera, but I think it's because I tabbed into the different pane on Discord, but hopefully it comes up. Looks like you're back. So just felt like that was worth sharing, and I've been kind of talking around to people and so forth. Just curious if this has been similar on other servers and so forth, but I seemed like a fun fact to kind of toss in there and see who or which classes have been more interested in swapping.
Yeah, wow, that is interesting. I'm just, wow, for the monks, that's incredible.
Yeah,
and
right, and what's interesting, at least from kind of like the top or highest resonance bracket for PvP is that Monk counters Necro. So the fact that that Necro is so high and Monk has gone so low, Necros may actually not lose the spotlight in the meta, right? Necro may actually be comparatively stronger because now there's nobody there to counter him. So
that's a good point. Huh? Interesting. Do you think, and I know you might not want to share this yet, but do you think that the Blood Knight hard counters any certain class yet that you've seen?
Difficult for me to say because the matches that I've done haven't had great like class distribution.
Sure.
But in general, I did not have any difficulty with Demon Hunters. The gap closers that Blood Knight had just made it impossible for them to get away. So I felt like at least in the matches I've played, it was a counter, but I just don't have enough data, big enough sample size, so to speak, quite yet. But
that would just a gut check. That makes sense though. Like I mean, it has at least a few iframes or invulnerability frames on the Blood Knight, so I could definitely see where using those to your advantage to get closer to that Demon Hunter would be advantageous. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see also if they change builds. I'm a big fan. When I play Demon Hunter, I love to play a build that runs both Daring Swing and Escape. It's not all that popular, but I love having the extra mobility on my loadout. I just find it so useful. But like I said, it's not incredibly popular, but I do find it strong.
Yeah, totally.
I can't get these mobs to spawn, so they just will not come back and allow me to farm. So, fortunately, I'll have to go to a different spot. But I wanted to just kind of show off how you're able to kind of keep that up. But we'll just have to do a separate video for that. Was there any other thoughts or any other goals that you have with Blood Knight in terms of trying a different set or a unique set, something you haven't seen, or you're just still kind of exploring whatever option you can and going from there?
I think I'm still kind of exploring. I'm definitely in the honeymoon phase, if you will, with the Blood Knight. I look forward to being able to jump back on the game. I'm having some like very genuine fun with the new class. You sort of always get excited, or at least I do, when I class change to a new class or a class I haven't been on for a while. But a brand new class like this, where there's not a set build that you know yet, and that's the one thing I've sort of alluded to in a couple of videos that I've talked about the Blood Knight. So far, it does seem like there's definitely could be a different, like several different builds, and for that it seems kind of exciting from a PvE aspect alone. I don't do a ton of PvP, like but it definitely seems like there could be a bunch of like fun builds to utilize different essences. So for that it keeps it pretty engaging. Like that's why I fell in love with the Wizard, is that there's so many different builds that could be viable. So whenever I got sort of bored of one, like went from like a full fire build to a an ice build or something like that. So the Blood Knight feels similar in that way.
Yeah, one thing that I actually think about the Blood Knight is it might have the most flexibility with sets and the most viable builds out of all of the classes, at least in my opinion. There are some other classes where you can run things, like you can do a continual damage monk, and yes, you can kill the mobs, but it's kind of substantially weaker than like a gloom monk and so forth. So I'm really impressed with how balanced in regards to the sets that this class has been and just the options in that. So I've really had a fun, like you're saying, even though I'm still trying to log in and farm, whether it be items or materials or farm set items. I'm really doing no different than I was doing after my dailies before, but just the excitement of the new class or new builds and potential there has really just kind of brought it to a different level.
Yep. Nope, I agree. That's well said.
Trying to see if I have everything for the AoE build. I have a fair amount of things here. I might be able to pull something off, but I'll try to set that up and maybe put it at the end of this. But I have, aside from the weapons, it looks like I have the majority, and it's basically just using some continual damage, AoE damage from the swarm of bats, and just some poison as well as some burn damage and things of that nature, and coupling it with potentially 4-piece Banquet and maybe 2-piece Vithus to extend the duration of things around you, like say the swarm of bats and so forth, and maybe even the 2-piece or 6-piece option would be kind of flexible there. You could double up for damage from Grace per se and run Massacre for movement speed and a lot of things of that nature. But well, I know you've got things to do, and I just appreciate you squeezing this in. I know that you have a busy day and a busy week, but much appreciated. And I'm sure a lot of people will enjoy hearing kind of the thoughts and different perspectives that we have and so forth. So
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I look forward to doing more of these with you. Definitely enjoy you as a person as well as a content creator. So always a pleasure.
Same. I
talk with you.
appreciate that. And I will leave all the info and links and so forth for Misery Hates Company in the description below. For anybody interested, feel free to check it out when you get the chance. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch and have a great day.
See ya.